Hi, welcome to the Visionista podcast. I'm your host, Jessica East of Nor Marketing and PR. This podcast is for entrepreneurs where we talk about business and work-life balance. Welcome to the Visionista podcast. This is your host, Jessica East, and today we are talking about intellectual property or IP with my friend slash kind of like, we do the same thing, but we get along. So David Esrati, the infamous David Esrati. So David, thank you for agreeing to chat with me today about some of the things that we do. You want to tell everybody a little bit about like who you are and your business?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Jessica. And most people outside of Dayton will have no idea why she refers to me as infamous. People
You
in
can
Dayton,
Google him.
People in Dayton all consider me infamous, but I'm kind of the guy who asks the questions to try to make people think in this city. A lot of times it's along the ways of political and free speech. I've been in a couple civil rights lawsuits over public access to government, public access to records. I've won them all.
Mm-hmm.
I've been assaulted by the former mayor. I've been arrested by a former mayor who's now a congressman. He lost that case as well. I mean, it's
only he would lose that upcoming re-election campaign.
Well, unfortunately, God must have loved stupid people. He made so many of them.
Wow.
So again,
podcast for later.
in my business, we try to do two things. We say we create lust and we evoke trust. And those are really the basics of what you do in advertising. You want somebody to trust you, and you want them to lust after whatever service or product or anything else that you have. Now, that is my tagline, and it is copyrighted, so do not steal it. So
that's a perfect segue, actually.
Yeah, but the whole thing about intellectual property, the problem is most small businesses, even some larger businesses, don't understand what intellectual property is, and they don't understand the difference between having an in-house agency and hiring someone else to do your work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the control between whether you own everything or you only own the final output, what you paid for, what you contracted for, which is usually not spelled out in the contract that you signed to hire somebody, and it should be.
Mm-hmm.
You must understand that you are buying finished product, not all the working files. You may or may not have rights to things forever. We have there's a local design firm, pretty well known, very expensive, was hired by a car dealer. And they produced an amazing commercial, very, this car dealer through the ages. And it was all this newsreel footage and cut in with current people. And they ran it for 90 days and people loved it and everything else. And then he wanted to keep running it. And they said, well, you've got to pay the union talent again for the rights to use it. You only bought the rights for the one campaign. And the car dealer had a hissy fit, and the agency no longer does work for that car dealer. And there was, threats of a lawsuit and everything else, but you have to know what you have rights to.
Mm-hmm.
If you license music from, let's say the Rolling Stones to run a commercial, you pay the Rolling Stones every time you run that commercial. And you don't run it forever and ever. And the internet has screwed this up something awful because stuff just doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, what kind of, do you trust the counters put on by YouTube at how many times it's been run? And then, hell, YouTube's not the only game in town. I can load video on my server
and
run it forever. And so, this has become a bigger and bigger issue. And it comes down to, you got to learn about this. You've got to educate yourself. You've got to have things in writing. And more than likely, the person, if you're hiring an ad agency or a design firm, they should know more about this than you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I get this with rebranding and branding, for startups all the time. They come in and say, "Oh, we want to be this." And I'm like, "Have you done a search?" "Well, I bought the URL, so
Mm-hmm.
that means I own it." I'm like, it's not how it works.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to work at a large graphic design firm that I got them into a company called Mead Data Central. They'd never been able to get in there and get any work out of Mead Data Central. So they ended up doing some ads for them and they were real happy with them. I had left and then they did more stuff. And then Mead said, "We want to rebrand Mead Data Central." And they hired this design firm to do the rebrand. And they came up with the name Lexus, Lexus. Lexus, Lexis. Now, a lot of you know Lexus, the car company, Lexus.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Oh, one's information tech and the other is cars, luxury cars. There's no problem here. They're spelled differently." That didn't stop Lexus, the car company, from suing Lexus, the information technology company. And it cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to defend it. And finally, they were granted the right.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it gets kind of hinky when Lexus, the car company, starts having internet driven cars that might say have readers that are reading license plates and see that there's Jessica's license plate and Jessica's had 29 DUIs, and the car decides to reroute based on that information, and all of a sudden you've got an
Yeah.
issue. It happened with Apple with the Beatles. I mean, same thing. Apple swore, we're not going to infringe upon your copyright. We don't have anything to do with music. We're a computer company. And then iTunes came and the Beatles said, "Come to Papa," and Apple
No
paid.
kidding.
So,
well, let's back up a minute because that's definitely a tale, a cautionary tale, two cautionary tales, because you kind of never know if you are starting a business, like where you're going to end up, because as opportunities arise and doors open, if it makes sense to go through them, you may be expanding or, starting like a sister company or something. So you never really know, and you want to protect yourself as best you can when you're starting. A lot of the people who listen to the podcast are like small independent people who try to do a lot of things themselves. So part of what we cover is how to do things yourself, and then also giving yourself permission. Like at a certain point, you really want to call an actual attorney. You really want to call an actual marketing company or an actual IT firm to handle these things, because you're making a couple bucks now. You didn't just start, last month or last quarter. You really owe it to yourself and the strength of your business to hire someone who can help you and be more knowledgeable than you can. Because no matter how hard we try and how much we Google and YouTube, I am not an expert in tax code, so I don't even bother. I'm like, no, you know what? I'm going to send this to my tax guy, check it off my list, and I'm done. So, what is intellectual property? We kind of jumped the gun a little bit and talked about, how it can go awry down the road or dealing with larger national brands. How would you describe intellectual property to someone who is just starting their business, or maybe they've been in business for a year or two and are really starting to look at how they present their business to the public?
Intellectual property usually is something that creates value and differentiates your brand. It's something unique to you. So it can be anything from your brand name
Mm-hmm.
to your brand mark to your processes that you have set up that should not be able to be replicated by anybody else, that if they're very different from everybody else. So intellectual property, for the most part, is something you have created uniquely
Mm-hmm.
that gives you a competitive advantage and creates value. And that's a really broad, non-legal mumbo jumbo explanation, but the Coke bottle, that shape is defined as, Coke will defend that to the end, along with their wave that goes underneath the ribbon.
Yeah.
That is Coke.
Mm-hmm.
And
they made that.
They made that and they defined it. And when it comes to colas, there it is. And so anybody else has to be very careful about having anything like that. You take Nike, which has been, a huge success. The brand was originally a running shoe being made with a waffle iron and rubber in a guy's garage to this, global behemoth.
Their logo was designed by an intern. Basically,
and
was a
and they paid her $35 for
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And
Phil she thought that was great at the time. She was like, whoa, I got paid for student work.
And Phil was really, he had envy of Adidas because the three stripes actually provided support to the shoe to make it so that the shoe wouldn't expand out. And he thought their logo couldn't be better, was the best. And he didn't know anything about what he got or the value of it, but it wasn't valuable until these two guys that he hired. And basically they were two guys. It was, Dan Wieden and David Kennedy. And I think they had a secretary, this little tiny agency. He'd worked with a bigger one in Seattle. And he's switched over to these guys, and they started work on it. And they kind of did okay for a few years, and then finally they stumbled upon this "just do it" line. And if you ask me, there are very few taglines that are as ingrained with a brand or as distinctively a culture as those three words. And what they've come to mean globally. Everybody can understand, how it fits with sport.
Yeah.
And that is Nike. And that was created by the agency. And Nike owns it. And other people can do the same ads with just do it because they did work out the intellectual property. But the thing that differentiates Nike is, for the most part, other than a few wanderings, they understood who gave them that value, and they keep pushing each other further and further. And they've got a relationship that's gone 35 years and kept growing and growing to the point where the two brands understand each other, and the work just continues to be outstanding. Now, because of that, Wieden has been able to hire some of the best talent in the business who want to come work on Nike. And so then they do work for other companies. Like they took Old Spice, which was just a dead brand. And next thing you know, I'm the man you wish your man would smell like, and I'm on a horse. Or all these different kernels for Kentucky Fried Chicken. All of a sudden, Kentucky Fried Chicken's like funny and cool and hip, and people want to try it out. That's Wieden and Kennedy. They are the only agency I know of. Number one, they're independent. They aren't owned by one of the major holding companies. But they're one of the only agencies that can manage to do work for Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's at the same time. And both clients are okay with it, even though normally they'd be like, hell no.
Yeah, because
that's my competition.
Yeah.
But it's because there is no agency that manages to do so much good work for so long. And if you meet Dan Wieden, you understand a big part of it. The guy's incredibly nice. He is incredibly soft-spoken and humble. And he just demands great work from people. And he gets it. He's got the kind of mind that he can see value in a brand. And, you walk in there in the office in Portland, it says fail harder on the wall. They've screwed up, but they keep trying and they keep doing stuff that, shakes the world.
Yeah.
That's awesome. The power of advertising. That's why I love this business. That's why I love what I do. Can you take a horrible, boring brand, can you take something, as mundane as running shoes and turn it into a cult?
The answer is yes, you can.
Yeah. And so the biggest problem you have with the small people, you might be starting your cleaning service, but where do you think Service Master started out?
Mm-hmm.
It started out with somebody who said, I'm going to work on my business instead of in it, and I'm going to grow it, and it's going to, become something huge.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who have the vision to see those things, who have the audacity to challenge the status quo, are the ones that change things. And when I first started, I went and talked to Joe and Annie Neri, who owned Books and Company at the time. I said, how did you build this amazing independent bookstore? And they said, read this book. And they pulled out The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And I read the book and I'm like, this is great. Because he talks about McDonald's. And he says, Ray Kroc saw the McDonald brothers making burgers and saw that they had a process that was repeatable.
Mm-hmm.
And that he could, with his milkshake machines, he could put it all together and it could be bigger. And look how much bigger it got.
Mm-hmm.
The
So
McDonald brothers didn't see it.
No. So it's having vision and partnering with people who can help you take that vision beyond maybe what you're capable of doing yourself. So,
that starts out with the very basics of naming your company. Don't name your business after your street address, like Dorothy Lane Market. There are no Dorothy Lane Markets on Dorothy Lane.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
There was a hair salon, 23 West 2nd Street. The building was torn down 40 years ago,
Is it still there?
No, 23 2nd Street evolved and eventually, first it moved to Ludlow, then it moved for a while. I think it was on Brown Street before it became something new.
Yeah. Well, and naming, a lot of people have a lot of opinions about the name of my business, Noir. And, well, how'd you get there? How'd you figure that out? And, it took a minute because I had several things that I was considering that I thought were cool. But at the end of the day, I knew I didn't want to limit myself with a name because I want to work with suits that are super uptight, like my dad. And I want to work with other creative people who are open to outside of the box and crazy thinking. And so I needed something that was a bit ambiguous to cover both of those things. And, noir is French for black. It's my favorite color, like all black all the time. It's the presence of all things in printing or the absence of all things in web design. And I liked it and it worked and it's still working. And, I think it's important to try and have vision when you're coming up with names. Like sometimes if it's a family name, Smith and Sons Roofing or whatever, like that makes sense. But if you're trying to do
it comes time to sell it.
Well, that's also touche. But like trying to think of the long-term goals and the 5-year plan and the 20-year plan.
I worked for a guy when I was just out of the Army before I went to college who had a painting company and he called it Williams and Sons. I said, did your dad start this? He says, no. He said he just made it sound like it'd been around for a while. I own it. But you don't even have any kids. He says, I know. So
did he buy it or why
no, he just, his name was Williams and he said, I'll make it Williams and Sons and fake the whole thing.
Well, hashtag fake it till you make it, I guess. But
it worked for President Trump, so
Moving on. To try and keep it apolitical today and get myself in trouble.
I had this conversation with Larry Holland at Graphica. I said, so why didn't you name it Holland, Stockstill, and Stainless? He said, it sounds like a law firm.
It does.
So, when basically Larry died and then Stockstill and Stainless wanted to turn it over to the next generation, they did. And they didn't have to rename it. Drew Cronenwett and Jeff Stapleton and Cindy Schnell took over and they owned it and they ran it for a while until they got bought up by what was called Halfenbrack and is now Upward.
Mm-hmm.
So, Upward, they're a little smarter. They figured out that they don't want to be named after their founders. And even though my name Googles amazingly, I mean, you search ESRATI, you're going to find my name.
So he's asking you to please Google his name, everyone.
You will also find, more than likely, a "fuck you, David Esrati" page right there on Facebook. So it has its advantages and its disadvantages, but this agency was built to be more than just me and to be a group of people. And if I fall over dead one day, it can continue on and people will expect the same quality and caliber of work.
Yep.
And it's called the Next Wave Marketing Innovation because the Next Wave obviously was taken 6 million different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And marketing and innovation is what Peter Drucker said were the only two things a business has. And I read a lot of business books. I thought that was pretty much something I wanted to point out over and over. It doesn't say advertising agency because I'd also read a book called Living by Design by the people who founded Pentagram,
Mm-hmm.
which is a design consultancy that also has architects and interior designers and product designers. And they do the entire marketing branded experience out of one shop. And
I have a major girl crush on them, I'll be honest.
These guys have been going for 50 years and they've done some of the best work you've ever seen. I mean, there are very few firms.
Paula Scher, I would like to be Paula Scher when I grow up. She's a fucking badass.
She became a Pentagram partner.
Yes.
So did Woody Pirtle, who at one time I thought was a great graphic designer, and then he sort of fizzled. Mm-hmm. Kit Henricks. I mean, they've got some of the best graphic designers in the world that have joined up with them. Mm-hmm. And they all run their own thing, but they can lean upon the back office mm-hmm. when they need to, and they can create teams from different offices in different places around the country as they need it.
Yeah.
And that model impressed me. So that's what I sort of hoped the Next Wave would become, with architects, graphic designers, advertising people, web developers, lawyers, even, because you need lawyers, etc. Yep. So it didn't get there, but it's still.
Well, you're not dead yet, so it could. What's your 5-year plan? Maybe that's coffee for later.
I've been going for 32 years, so that's pretty good for most small businesses.
It is. So then let me ask you, like, the downsides to intellectual property as a creator, whether you mean to create something like, we're creating a brand, a logo, a video, or whether it's a process that like you have to do to service your clients, such as like the Coke bottle. How do you protect yourself?
So, there was an AP photographer that took a picture of the president. Number one, he's a public figure. Mm-hmm. Number two, they were sort of restrict access to who can get to take pictures of the president. It's not something I can, hey, I want to walk in and take a picture of the president. No.
I mean, you could, but you would be underneath a pile of Secret Service individuals very quickly.
Right. I mean, so the pictures are technically, they become sort of the public domain. Now, he took a picture, and there's an artist named Shepard Fairey who's known for Obey and Andre the Giant, and then he made this poster for Hope and Change for the Obama campaign mm-hmm. with the red and the blue and the very stylized, and he got sued by the photographer saying, "You stole my work." Now, yeah, you can see, he might have used that image, but what he did with it and what the photographer did with it are two totally different things. Mm-hmm. And the photographer never would have even thought to do something like that.
Mm-hmm. Or he would have. So Shepard got sued, and that, frankly, I don't care. That's bullshit. Mm-hmm. I call bullshit on that because, and you want to talk about stolen, Shepard has stuff stolen all the time. So his big thing originally was Andre the Giant has a posse and had his weight and everything. And he had these little stickers, and he put them up outside of his school when he was going to RISD. And here I am with Next Wave has a posse. And so Andre, is that what that says?
That's what it says.
Is that you? Who's the person?
Well, the surfer he's kind of anonymous, but I dressed up as him once.
Okay.
I took my surfboard to a Dayton Ad Club guerrilla marketing meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lunch and learn down Channel 16. I chalked the sidewalks. I said, you can go, learn about guerrilla marketing, or you can hire one, the next wave. And the thing that really screwed things up was apparently they have this marble that they have like donors' names right outside the building by the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these messages all up and down on that's Jefferson Street. I had them all done. I even took pictures of them up in the parking garage above so you could see them. So one of the things I wrote was, and this I thought, I had everything written down what I was going to do before I went and did it in the morning. But one of the things I saw these marble things, I said, it costs a lot of money to put your name right here, but talk is cheap. Chalk is cheap.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they had a cow because those people spent a ton of money and so they're out there pressure washing my chalk and I get pissed. So I go back out there and chalk it again.
Was this all before the meeting or did you go after?
Before the meeting, I chalk it again. And obviously it's not as good the second time and there's less of it.
Well, yeah, because you were rushed.
And then they send me a letter threatening to throw me out of the ad club, and the speaker was mad. I show up in my suit with my sunglasses, my briefcase, and my surfboard, like my logo. And they just didn't think it was very funny. But Bob Yeck, who's been in the business, and I miss Bob. He died about 2 years ago.
Bob was cool.
He was on the board, and he says, that was the best thing I've ever seen. And yet they wanted to throw me out of the ad club. I mean, it was the first of 3 times, and they finally just did it. So I'm not allowed to be in the AAF Dayton chapter, so I'm in the AAF Cincinnati chapter where they love me. Because I bring in speakers like, Greg Hahn from BBDO, and now he's with Mischief USA. And the guy's won every award known to man. And, I brought him in. I've worked with him on some other things. And I attend meetings and I try to contribute because I believe our craft requires constant learning, training. You have to reinvent yourself and invest and think and be pushed. And
it's nice to be in a group of people that inspire you with either completely new ideas or new takes on an old theory, which actually was on my list of things to talk about, inspiration versus just a flat out copy. The web has made it easy to access everything that Pentagram has ever done, everything that BBDO has ever done, Nike, all through the years.
It's all there.
And you referenced the Obama poster. What's the difference, for somebody maybe new to the craft or somebody who's trying to do it for themselves between seeing something and saying, that is such a cool idea. I want to use something like that for my business versus, oh, I am going to use this for my business. Like in school, I think they had, was it school? God, I don't even remember those. But like they had kind of like a thing, like you had to alter the original image by so much to be free of copyright laws or whatever. I don't remember what that was. I try not to do that, just like period, because I don't want myself or my clients to have to deal with the mess. Because even if you're in the right, you still have to pay an attorney $400 an hour to prepare and, cover your butt in court.
But this part of the business hasn't changed from day one. It's just like in music. I mean, there's 88 keys on the piano. Mm-hmm. There's copying a song. Mm-hmm. There's riffing on a song. Mm-hmm. There's being inspired by a song. And it's just a matter of how much you're inspired of it between, you end up being, what's the guy, Robin Thicke with his ripping off of Marvin Gaye. Where you can cut back and forth. But I asked this question of Larry Holland, who was my first boss in this business. He owned Graphica, really brilliant guy, really nice. He says, we all build up a library of ideas and things we saw and things we like. And hell, we used to have files that we cut stuff and save it and file it. And now you just have Pinterest boards.
Yeah. In the pre-computer days, that's what we had to do.
we had files and we had annuals. We had, the awards books, and we would look at these and then we wouldn't just go and copy. We'd say, well, how about if we sort of took a bit of this and a bit of that? And, just like a chef makes a dish a little differently, it's the same thing. So, you have to have that vocabulary in order to know that you're stealing other and doing it correctly versus I just went and found something I liked and ripped it off. And I swear people do that left and right.
People do that a lot. And I think there's some confusion, so this will be more for my independents that are trying to do everything themselves. If you see something online, you do a Google search for a specific genre or a specific type of image or background or whatever, just because you find it on Google does not necessarily mean that you can screenshot it or download it and then use it for your own marketing and campaign purposes. A lot of times, especially now, if you're getting something from stock photography, it'll have the watermarks over it. So it's very clear. If you want this, you have to pay for this.
And how many times have you seen work go to the printer with that?
Well,
nonprofits do it all the time.
Well, yours truly, and I think sometimes it's just an oops. I was working on something yesterday, and we had very quickly gone from the comp stage, trying to get some logos. This is for a print publication. So it was like a masthead, a logo that was going in a masthead design. And, we went around several different rounds of edits and things. And I guess they decided that they wanted to go with one and didn't let me know about that until they sent the copy. And they were like, hey, it's so many pages. When can we see it? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, So we start laying it out. And then I get to looking at it. I'm like, is that a watermark there? Because, there was a bit of something that just to save time, I bought or was intending to buy from a stock site. And I was like, wait a minute. I need to actually go and replace this with the actual RTP, not the FPO. Ooh, that was mine. Sorry. I need to actually go buy this thing. I'm really glad I clocked that before it went to the printer. I do see that a lot with nonprofits. I see it with people who just get busy and forget because they put the FPOs in there because they don't want to buy it and then have the client not like
FPO
what they bought.
For position only.
Yes. Sorry guys, industry term. But anyway, so yeah, it's accidental, and also, people who try to skirt the issue, but there's a lot of stuff that you find. A friend of mine owns a photography studio in town. And there was another studio from Cincinnati that found her images and her website online and just took, screen captures of everything and put them on their website as their portfolio, saying that they can do the exact same type of things, and then tried to pass her images off as their own. I believe that she sued them, and I believe that she won. And this particular company had been around. They were doing video production first, and then they went into wedding photography and boudoir photography. And they had 3 different businesses, and all 3 businesses were taking other people's work and trying to pass it off as their own. So, in that aspect, sometimes it can be difficult for people who are in the business of creating, a photo, a video, a sound file, some kind of interior architectural design. If people are taking those things and putting them in their own portfolios to pass them off as their own, I think that's why it's so important that people are clear about who did what. Before we started recording, we were talking about some of these larger places that have maybe 100 people working on an ad campaign. And so, those 100 people legitimately worked on whatever the ad campaign is. You've got a copywriter, you've got a designer, maybe somebody else doing some web stuff.
Yeah, somebody
So,
doing music clearance and research, and
mhm,
you've got the planning department, you've got all these people, account execs, but that doesn't mean that they came up with that campaign.
mhm. So I think it's important when people are talking about, especially their portfolios and their books of work when they come in, to either pitch to new clients or to try and get work, at a firm or in corporate America in the creative department, to be clear about, what exactly you did for that particular thing.
That's why I always ask students to bring in their sketches.
Hmm.
Like, I want to see how they got to what they put together. And if they're doing a campaign, this used to drive me nuts from the modern, used to be called the School of Advertising Art. These kids would only show 6 pieces, and they'd have this great headline. I'm like, for Nike, I'm like, let me see the original ad, because I doubt yours is better than that.
Hmm.
And they were taking credit for, a great headline with a crappy, and the copy was carrying it. And that stuff just doesn't fly. One
Yeah.
thing I was hoping we'd touch on is websites, and we get this all the time with people hiring someone else to do their website without understanding who actually owns the technology used to build and host the website. And I say, I if I owned a business, I would say I only want to use open source software. So you
Hmm.
can't say you're going to sell this back to me. I
Hmm.
want to know about every license for any plugins, themes, or anything else that you're buying that's got a license, and how much it costs, and how much that I'm going to have to pay each year.
Hmm.
And I want to know that I will have, when we stop working together, the full ability to move it off of your server onto another server, and that I have all rights to my domain
Hmm.
and any of the sites that were built. And people find that this is often not the case, or they use some technology, or they do it in Square or something in Squarespace, and Squarespace changes something, and they get charged more. That's the great thing about working in open source platforms. You can keep whatever you want at your own risk on security stuff, but you can own what the tools.
Hmm. And
And
that's a good point. We've had several clients in the past who started their website themselves,
Mhm.
small family owned businesses, and they were using, Time Warner Cable had some hosting building, something
Right.
like that. And they didn't realize, and we didn't realize until we got in there and we're trying to make changes, that if you have, they're a local internet company here, now it's Spectrum, they actually retained all rights to the URL that our clients bought and a whole bunch of other things. So the only way to stop paying ridiculous fees every month and every year through them, and also to have, some more control over some back end functionality, that we had to go in and code, was to actually change the URL. And, if
It's
you just
criminal.
started 6 months ago, maybe that's nominal. It's a pain in the butt, but it's not going to kill you. If you've been in business for 5 years and people are used to going to that web address, your email has that web address or the
Yeah.
at,
The
that's
Berry company is doing the same thing,
insane.
or whatever they're calling themselves now.
Yeah.
And they used to do phone books, and they're building these sites, and they're saying we own all the content on it. And so even the words that you gave them, they're saying
Mhm.
they own, and you can't use it on a new website.
Mhm.
That's just wrong.
Yes.
And what they're building in terms of, delivering links and everything else is through these huge link farms they're building that interconnect. And it's wrong, and they
Mhm.
get away with it.
Yeah.
I can't even remember all the names they've had for their services they're selling, but lawyers fall into the same thing, buying websites that are just cookie cutter from a subdivision of LexisNexis and Hubble Martindale and the rest of these things. Those are not yours.
Mhm.
Don't do it.
Mhm.
Spend the money, do it right.
And by that you mean,
Own your own website, own the tools that it's built with, and then hire people that know how to write and people who know
Mhm.
how to, put pictures together and do videos and put the whole story together for you.
Mhm.
And if you're a lawyer, you shouldn't be spending your time working on things like that.
No. So basically, find yourself some trusted partners to work with, and make sure that you're
Absolutely.
reviewing your contracts so that you own
What
your
you paid for.
your finished stuff. Because otherwise you may be very unhappy in 5 years and stuck. So, well, I think that we've covered everything I wanted to talk about today. Was there anything else, like if you had to put into summation your thoughts on intellectual property for
I,
people?
I'd just say that most people have a real hard time creating a business instead of a job for themselves.
Mhm,
And reading the book, The E-Myth, would be really good for them.
mhm,
Nothing else that Michael Gerber wrote was worth reading, but that is called The E-Myth Revisited now. But that is a really solid book. If you want to know about branding, there's a book by Marty Neumeyer called The Brand Gap.
mhm,
It's a brilliant, easy to digest book about branding and explains it well. Um, I've got a list of books actually on my site, thenextwave.biz/book list. And these are the books that I've read and reread or used over and over. Hey, Whipple, Squeeze This by Luke Sullivan about advertising.
mhm,
There's The Brand Gap. There's Positioning, which came out, God, in the 70s. It's brilliant then. It's brilliant now. Al Rees and Jack Trout. So, read those books, learn about the businesses that you're going to hire so you can at least tell who's good at it before
mhm.
you hire them, and then figure out who they are, trust them. I have never seen people make such dumb mistakes as mistaking size for quality in advertising. It's not having 100 people working at your firm that makes you do great advertising.
Yep.
It's 2 people working on your account that figure out the magic and then how they grow it. And if you're not big enough for that big firm, you're not going to get the magic people.
Yeah.
And they just don't understand. So, um, learn what intellectual property is, learn what differentiates your brand, and then protect it and make sure you every step of the way stick to what you created
Mhm,
as a brand and live it, and it will either get traction and grow or it won't.
mhm.
And probably helps if you don't pick fights with the mayor or the congressman and all the rest of that. So we do most of our business outside of Dayton, Ohio now, and I'm
For
just
more
fine with that.
information on that, please see the following.
Yeah.
Well, I will put links in the bottom. The way the
Awesome.
podcast is and the way it's listed, there will be links at the
Awesome.
bottom, so people can connect with you. LinkedIn, Twitter. What's the best way for somebody to connect with you personally?
LinkedIn's always easy because, again, you Google my name on LinkedIn. I'm the only one, David Esrati, Esrati. You
Okay.
can email me at surf@thenextwave.biz, so you don't even have to spell my last name. Twitter, I tweet, I read tweets, but I don't spend a ton of time living there.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
I'm too busy. There's too much stuff to read, too much stuff to do. So LinkedIn is obviously the best, but
Mhm.
put a note in there. Don't
Okay.
just don't just do a friend request. Say why you're reaching out to me, and then I'll engage.
So
Or go to our website. We got contact forms. We've got all kinds of things. We've got a little mini ad school there for videos. We've got case studies. We've got links to ad schools. We've got links to media outlets in Dayton, Ohio. So we got links to our competition. We got a whole page with all the agencies in the tri-state, because you're one click away, and why not be on my site instead of on somebody else's?
mhm.
Who says Yahoo has to be the only directory out there, right? So
Cool. So I will put a link to your reading list and a link to
awesome.
LinkedIn for you. And then if you
Awesome.
want me to put your email. I'm not going to put the email out there because I don't want you to get bots. But anyway, so I'll put those links in there. So if you're interested, just look at the actual like listing. So if you're listening in the car, just go back and look at the actual post. But anyway, thank you for chatting with me today, David.
Thanks for having me.
This has been the Visionista.